So we're live on Facebook also. So first of all, I want to thank Rahul and Pearl for joining in for today. Uh, just a little bit of background. So I run a global tax and legal venture which is called Tax Mantra Global, and we are present in India and Singapore. And during the pandemic, I also did something interesting, in which is that we launched our investment banking firm, which is headquartered in Singapore, which is called Profit Board. And we run a couple of interesting webinar series uh, through which we try to resolve and try to address issues which are related to startup ecosystem. In fact, Paul and Rahul, you will be interested to know that we are launching our own course which is on 8th of October, wherein we are shortlisting 10 startups, and we will bring those startups to you guys for your interest, if you are interested to fund them. So we are working on and selecting and grooming those startups at this point of time. Those are mostly from Southeast Asia and India. So today, first I want to introduce Pearl. So Pearl, thanks for joining in. Pearl, as she rightly said, that she just launched her fund recently in India. She has moved back from UK, if I'm correct, and she has got more than 10 years of experience with uh, investment banking, with different assignments both in US and UK. And it's so good that we have someone who's actually coming back from UK and want to start a fund which is actually targeting uh, startups at a very initial stage, and helping them to reach a stage wherein they are ready for Series A and pre-Series A. So that's very interesting. I will leave. I will request Pearl later to talk more about herself, what she has done in last 10 years. Rahul, dear friend, thanks for joining in. Everyone knows you in the ecosystem. You have a lot of experience, and the very interesting startups which you guys have backed up in last 1 decade or so. And you recently launched interesting VC firm, I think in 2018, if I'm correct, 18, which is called Arkham, and they have backed interesting startups, Rail Yatri and Topper, and many other interesting startups. So, in today's webinar, we will discuss a few of the interesting issues which are in front of us when we talk about startup ecosystem in India and fundraising and issues around it. So, to start with, I request Pearl to just talk about herself for a bit, and let us know what she did for the last 10 years in investment banking, and then I will ask Rahul to also talk about himself and the fund, and the incredible job that their fund is doing for the startup ecosystem. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Alok, for the warm welcome and for the introduction. So I spent about last 10 years across US and UK, started out with Bank of America Merrill Lynch in the investment banking division, where I was primarily helping with M&A across different sectors. Did that for 2 years, moved to a fund of funds called UTIMCO, which backs several PE funds, venture capital funds, and infra funds. After a couple years of that, further moved on to a $78 billion private equity fund in New York that invested mostly in clean tech, infra tech. And we were sort of making investments across all the different products, starting all the way from debt, preferred equity to equity. Worked in the New York office for a few years and then their London office, because the plan was always to eventually move back to India. Born and brought up here, knew that I wanted to be part of the startup ecosystem. We started Exenius Ventures about 5 months ago. We're a micro VC fund with $10 million, and we focus primarily on women co-founders and women in leadership team. So it's a big part of our thesis to make sure that women are promoted through our portfolio companies.
That's great. That's great. Rahul, I would request you to speak few things
Sure.
about yourself
Yeah.
and the fund.
So the fund has been rebranded to Arkham Ventures. Arkham means limitless in Sanskrit. So that's what we also want from our founders' ambitions, because we are looking at Middle India, which we have come to as a thesis. So something that we focus on. We like the fact that as a largest, most scale market, Middle India is about 400 million people earning household incomes between $5,000 to $30,000. So it's the top part of the bottom and the lower part of the top. So it's the broad band in the middle, and we feel that this segment is suddenly last couple of years has been approachable using technology, and till then it was not accessible in a meaningful manner because of just lack of access, lack of identity. And the primary spends in this segment is on fintech, healthcare, food agri, and mobility logistics. Those are also our 4 areas of focus. We invest early stage, we come in pre-series A to pre-series B. And in this new fund, we have made 6 investments so far. So Realia 3 and Topper were actually my previous investments.
Okay.
And this one, the first one that we have announced is a company called Jai Kisan. It's in the agri supply chain space, one of its kind company. And in fact, today was the first board meeting for us as new investors. So yeah, we've kicked off. It's been an active 5 months. We've really been looking at a lot of deal flow, and we've been deploying quite actively. We feel this is a good year for venture.
That's great, Rahul, and great to hear from you. To start with, I wanted to know in terms of what's happening in COVID, and uh, uh, with every crisis, there will be opportunities also. So, first to Pearl, so what kind of opportunities do you see, Pearl? What kind of startups which are coming up and raising capital, growing in last 5 months? If you can give us some insight in terms of uh, uh, the 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 things which you have really noticed.
Mhm. Yeah, so we invest in very early stages. I think right before Rahul would come in, primarily write checks of 100 to 200K. So at this stage, what we were seeing in March and April was that deal flow had stopped, or founders were reconsidering if they wanted to raise funds. But for the last 3 to 4 months, a lot of deals coming in, specifically in edtech. I think every other pitch that we are getting is in edtech, trying to solve either white spaces, in the early pre-K space, or the K to, not necessarily in the K-12 space, but more upskilling, reskilling space. So a lot of those kind of deals coming in. We're also seeing quite a few things come in fintech, and not necessarily on alternative lending, because that has dried up, but so mutual funds, wealth management, and other aspects within fintech. Health tech has been very active for the last few months as well. A lot of digitization of pharmacies, hospitals, and other areas within health tech that's coming up. The other one that I feel people have started to talk about, because the TAM has expanded quite a bit with this COVID, is digitization of MSMEs. So a lot of solutions that want to bring small businesses online. Small businesses have become a lot more open to adopting technology, adopting these solutions, because some of them had almost zero revenues for a few days. So I think these are few things that we have started to see come up and also get funded.
Yeah, yeah. Point taken. Rahul, what have you noticed in last 5 6 months, and what do you see what going to happen moving forward, and in terms of funding, and what are the changes which you feel that which are permanent now?
Yeah, so digitization obviously is getting accelerated quite a bit in India. Right? We're being forced
Yeah.
into, in the US, e-commerce penetration has gone up from 10-12% to 30-40%. And we're seeing similar patterns here as well. We are looking at our 4 sectors, which I mentioned. So in fin, health, and agri, we are seeing a lot of traction. And we attribute it to the fact that these are essential services. So what we're also seeing, at least in terms of consumer dollars, they're moving from non-essential to more essential. And there is tremendous amount of traction. So specifically seeing, fin APIs, anything which leads to more digitization of financial services. companies that are building APIs for that. Of course, EdTech has picked up quite a bit. That's also a phenomenon. I mean, it's a sign of the time. Agri, we have seen a lot of growth in, and we are seeing actually broader investor interest in agri, as well as some of the tailwinds of regulatory changes have been helping in opening up areas which were closed before, and the geo-led adoption of mobile tech has been pretty helpful in delivering consumer services to the various constituents. And of course, the overall economy, now the numbers have come out, the overall economy has shrunk, but agri has grown this year. So the only part of the GDP that is growing is agri, and it's showing in the companies that we meet.
Yeah.
And healthcare for us, again, a lot of digitization in healthcare, where hospitals are adopting multiple solutions for patient management, patient record, and on the treatment diagnosis side. So overall, there are spends that are happening in the hospital space, which lead to several SaaS themes and obviously B2C themes. And the last is we are seeing a lot of last mile delivery pickup. So given that now home delivery is the is the default option for most people, that's another sector we are seeing pick up a lot. And of course, the ban of the Chinese apps has led to a lot of white spaces getting opened up. So we are seeing massive growth in content that is being consumed, both audio content as well as video content.
Yeah. So if you can name any startup where you funded, Rahul, I understand there was one agri-tech startup, but any other startup you are looking to fund or have funded, or any sector specific which you are looking to do in terms of which has got really positive impact?
I can't name
I,
it.
I don't want you to name, but maybe
Yeah.
sector, because I just wanted to understand in terms of what's your interest at this point of time, which will help our audience. Yeah.
Sure, Alok. So we back something in the health care space, which is SaaS for hospitals, mid-tier hospitals, and this is a subscription-based company where hospitals pay for every patient that gets onto their system, and they're solving the patient scheduling, or the the whole workflow of OPD. So outpatient department is a mess. It's also a cost center in most hospitals, and so this is being converted. There is severe underspending on tech at hospitals, and now we have reached a space where healthcare is being looked at very differently in terms of what are the critical breaking points of our healthcare system. And on the healthcare delivery side, there are these this is emphasis on how do we manage patient flows better, because hospitals have come very close to seeing healthcare itself collapse in multiple countries, and hence that flow is very important to manage. The capacity utilization is very important to manage. So we have 3 billion OPD visits that happen in India every year, and we are looking at this company which aims to automate that. So it's a massive space. We are very excited about it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Pearl, since you are more engaged with early stage startups, do you feel that with the challenging situation we are in, it's become difficult for early stage startups to raise capital? Angel investing has gone down, you rightly said, in the month of April and May and June. So what is the scenario now, and do you feel that it has become more difficult for them to raise capital at an early stage?
No, I think in my experience, what we have seen is yes and no. It has become more difficult for certain sectors, specifically in travel, hospitality, and any sector that is directly impacted by COVID. You are seeing that people have become a little more selective, both in the kind of business models that they fund and then the sectors that they fund. However, having said that, there's still plenty capital available. Both I think at the VC side as well as the angel investing side, that we're seeing sort of flow into the right sectors as well as towards the right founders. Yes, people are asking more questions about, what's the path to profitability. At this point, they want to understand if there is any fundamental issues with the business that might not lead them to profitability, or are they giving up profitability in the hope of aggressive growth? So those are things that people are sort of asking more questions around, getting more comfortable with. But having said that, the situation is very different now, in our opinion, and what we are seeing compared to what it was in April. People have become a lot more comfortable underwriting even over Zoom calls. Maybe it's not taking 2 calls, maybe five calls, getting comfortable with all the founders, doing customer calls beforehand. So they're doing a lot more diligence, but people are writing checks, and capital has started to flow in.
Okay, that's good to hear. Uh, Rahul, what do you feel that because of this, there will be lowered valuation, and the more uh, vanity parameter in terms of profitability will kick in, and investors will become more aware in terms of putting in money where they see real profitability, or at a gross profitability at a near future, rather than just betting on ideas and something which may not seem to be profitable at this point of time.
I,
Profitability metrics has
yeah,
come back in a
I'll say
big
it.
way.
I'll say it in another way, which is it need not boil down to profitability, Alok, but the concern about B2C businesses, which require a lot of capital, is higher than before. It was already there post
Hmm.
the WeWork issue. Large capital infusions were generally seen as harder, but there is more attention and more, I guess, interest in SaaS and companies which have a revenue model sooner than later. So I would say there is more investor interest in more predictable business models, which at least have a path to profitability. And
Yeah.
what we are seeing is that there is a very high premium on C's and D's. So a lot of investors have to deploy capital, and they're looking to push higher up. When there is more optimism, it flows down, and when there is pessimism, it flows up. So C's and D's have become more expensive, and A's and B's are, I guess, are harder to fund. So we are seeing valuation weaknesses in B's and pre-series B. Some people are taking an extension of an A round and pushing out their B because they don't want to get a B round valuation done at this point. And also, some of the rounds are happening, 10 million plus checks being done on Zoom. Usually have to be insider led. So, then you're following up. So somebody has to know the company intimately to do the bigger round. So there is this double whammy of, capital is moving there, but they are also bigger checks and hence harder to do. So maybe local investors who already know the company, they're ending up doing these rounds, and the foreign capital is at this point not so active.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that the current investors are looking to back the companies, their portfolio companies, more rather than getting into more new leads and new deals. I think that's what happening. Even I realized that earlier, if there is a portfolio company, and they would preserve their money, and to see that they need to do follow-up round in their current portfolio to ensure that their startups are alive and survive this pandemic, rather than getting into the market and investing in new startups. But Rahul, a follow-up question on that: do you see that debt funding is an option for startups at this point of time, considering they are not able to raise equity round or new equity round at this point of time, and whether debt funding is a viable option for startups?
I think new providers of debt can certainly look at a cleaner book, but there is again uncertainty, and where there is a cash burn issue, people are trying to extend runway. The previous debt is getting, um, it's almost like a moratorium being asked from lenders on venture debt as well, where you want to lower your monthly EMIs and push it out as much as you can, so your cash runs as long as you can. So I would say the previous debt that has been given is under more strain at this point. So it is certainly something to be careful about. But like all good debt investments, you always want to go in with high amount of equity because that's where it's going to come from. So if the company doesn't have a round that has closed recently, because most debt products are to extend the runways in good times, right? It's an insurance, it's a security, and by itself they are very risky. So if you're not able to follow an equity round, then it's risky in my opinion.
Okay, got it. At this point of time, it's very important that we also discuss about the China factor, which has become very big, and there is a global anti-China sentiment. Uh, what is your view? I will ask this to both of you. What is your view in terms of funding impact on the Indian startup ecosystem because of there is a ban from China, and there was a RBI and FEMA restriction also with respect to any Chinese investors investing in India. So, what is the impact on the current investment and also in future? And do you see that India will have more investments from US and other geographies, or as a startup ecosystem, we will get negatively impacted? So, what's your view? I think Rahul, we can start, and then Pearl can add.
Yeah, it's certainly a loss of high volume risk capital. It's very um, very aggressive and very valuation friendly capital has obviously we don't account all this in regulatory decisions, but if somebody were to give a high valuation to an Indian startup, which means that Indian startups are getting more money for less dilution, right? Which is a great place to be. So you have capital to build that value, and it is a perfect example of globalization, because cheap capital is moving from lower opportunity country to higher opportunity country. Or uh, my sense is it will get replaced, because the world is full of over liquidity, uh, and it will only increase with, I think, trying to make up for the loss of COVID. Uh, the governments are going to pump systems with excessive liquidity, and once the domestic problems are solved, then that capital is going to start sloshing around the world. And tech venture is the favorite for that capital. We will eventually see it will come from the more I guess venture friendly countries to begin with, which is the US. I'm also anticipating that large US tech are going to start showing up on the Indian shores to either invest or acquire, and those would include the broader consumer companies from the US, as well as the B2B companies.
So if I can summarize what you're saying, that in the short run there may be a loss because there was a lot of risk capital which was flowing in from China to India, considering the size of market and the opportunity the Chinese investors were looking at. But your point of view is that in the long run and the medium term, these will be replaced, and there will be other investors who would come in and back, because there is an opportunity wherein maybe investors from Europe and Japan and US also, they might be interested now because they were not getting the opportunity to pump in the money which they wanted to. So So I think that's in the long run. I think long run, medium term, it might get replaced, but in the short run, there may be some hiccups and loss of opportunity.
Yeah, and it could also be, partly replaced by domestic capital. What I'm
Yeah.
again saying is that um, if it's a $10 million check, then 10 families are joining in for $1 million each, right?
Mm,
So, while there's still this, it's a larger check size, but people are able to put together rounds of that magnitude also. So,
mm,
China went through a massive shift.
mm,
Who knows? I mean, the Indian government also could be releasing capital. They're already doing that through SIDBI, and there
mm.
more that comes in. So domestically, there is, China went from a dollar to renminbi switch, very significantly in 2013-14.
Yeah, yeah.
Denominated funds became much smaller, and renminbi funds became much bigger.
Mm,
So
mm.
India should see that dollar to INR switch also at some point.
Yeah, so in a way, it's an opportunity for Indian investors and also Indian angel investors to come in a big way, because that's where the ecosystem will get the next hope. So Pearl, considering you back startups at the early stage, I think angel investors and investing at that initial stage by domestic investors, I think will kick in, because there was always an interest which was growing in the last couple of years, wherein the traditional investors and family businesses, family offices, and they wanted to invest in startups and get into understand what startup funding is all about. I think there is a huge opportunity, and because of this, there are more interest also. What's your view, Paul, on this?
Definitely. Our large LP base comes from India. In fact, the entire LP base is from India. So we've seen quite a bit of that. Um, that a lot of investors, Indian investors, are warming up to the idea of investing in startups. They have become a lot more aware of this asset class, warming up to the asset class. Plus, a big thing is that as interest rates, like on FDs and other instruments in India, is reducing, they need to find other high investments, and startups tend to be one of those. So a lot of them are, sort of thinking about it and moving towards investing in startups. We're hearing really positive reviews from the Indian investors that we're reaching out to and trying to raise money from. So, definitely we will see a lot more of that in the next few years as well, with the newer family offices opening up, people institutionalizing investments more.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree to that. So there is a connecting point to that. Now, considering that Indian domestic investors will come up and start investing more in Indian startups, I think with that, the concept of keeping your IP in India will also gain more importance. As of today, with majority of your investors are from US and China, and they are not very comfortable in keeping their IP in India, because somewhere they felt that IP gets diluted and compromised in India because of the not so great IP laws and restrictive laws. So they always wanted to have a country like Singapore or Delaware to set up the HQ and then have a subsidiary in India. With more Indian investors coming in, and there are restrictions in terms of how an Indian investor can invest outside India, and there is a step down entity restriction also. So, Rahul, do you see that finally we will start seeing more homegrown IP is getting developed in India, and we see uh, valued and high valued and homegrown IP tech companies and startups in India. As of today, most of the unicorns, they are actually not registered in India. The investment actually happens via a foreign country. So do you see that that will also finally happen, and India as a country will see more IP getting developed and nurtured and groomed in India itself?
So there are three interpretations. One would be where where it is really IP in the form of some deep research that has gone in. There is maybe it has been licensed out from Indian Institute of Science, and people are trying to commercialize it. Those that IP, in my view, can always get protected across the world. So that is not an issue. So, so that don't see as an objective. But if an investor is investing in a Delaware company and it is just a shell, and he knows that there is a second level which is sitting in India, and that's where the IP is, there is a maybe a concern that we are investing in just a shell, right? So you're not able to then raise capital against something, right? There's no protection if you're raising venture debt in the US. Then they will say, what do you have here? There's no IP here. So you have to create assets where capital around it can be best released or leveraged. If in India somebody were to give you venture debt around that IP, that'll be great. You can then monetize it. But from a protection look, I don't see any challenge. You can file protection in multiple countries, and you can have lawyers actually do your patent filing, and you can own patents sitting in India.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it depends on that. What you said about unicorns being incorporated, that's primarily, they're generally not IP centric companies. They're just where a lot of capital is coming in, and then investor protection is happening in different jurisdiction other than India. So Singapore is a favorite for a lot of large companies, and that's also where global investors are comfortable putting their check in. And the long-term thinking is that if you build it outside, then it's easier to do a transaction because a lot of global acquirers are more comfortable buying, assets in such transparent or clean jurisdiction. In fact, the other thing is that a lot of acquirers in the US don't prefer to acquire in the US. They have overseas capital which they don't want to bring into the US, which they want to use to acquire outside. So the answer is not necessarily that you have to incorporate in the US, but I feel that depending on what you're really trying to achieve, it will then result in some form of decision. I don't think in this environment of capital constraints, switching over or to a foreign location, or it's short term, it's going to be driven by where the capital is going to come from. But most Indian founders will not go incorporate unless the investors are pushing them to do it. So I don't see too much change happening because of this at this point.
Okay. For that, to my mind, India need to really improve on the ease of doing business. You rightly said that one of the critical reason why someone would want to incorporate outside India is when they get convinced by the investor, because the exit will become easy if they structure a company outside India. So I think
have to list in India before you list overseas.
Yeah. So that becomes a challenge. So till the time those RBI and FEMA provisions, angel tax was a big challenge that got relaxed a little bit. I think if till the moment we do not improve on those things, we don't see the HQ being actually be in India. So I think moving forward, Rahul, if investors, if startups want to reach you, what they need to do and how they can raise capital through your fund, uh, and at what size you come in, and uh, our audience. I've got a question from Ravi, and he's asking that he is into an edutech venture. So if he wants to reach you, how he can reach you, and what is the process to get the business model evaluated?
So our process is like any other VC firms. We have a lot of people writing in, connecting to us through LinkedIn and even Twitter sometimes, and we end up responding. We usually just from our framework, we like to write between 1 million to 3 million, so about 7 to 20 crores. And we like to come in companies which have some momentum, able to show some traction or business model clarity, product readiness, and some revenue. So we don't like to come where Pearl comes in. We like to come in after the company has built its business out.
Mm.
And where we go up to is where the company is looking for a scale up capital. So a full series B of 15-20 million, we would like to come in before that. So I've already mentioned the sectors, and I can share my email. So it's rahul@arkamvc.com. What we normally do is we go through the plans that come in. Obviously we can't respond to each and every plan that comes in, but we also try and do as much as we can. Whichever ones meet our criteria that I've just mentioned, we try and do a quick call to understand the business, 30-40 minutes, and if it still meets and we like it, if we feel something that we can add value to, something we would like to invest in, then we do multiple follow-ons. And those are usually about 10% of what we see. So 90% we do a quick first pass. 10% we would have multiple calls and deep dives, and then typically 1% we would invest in. So we do about 8 to 9 investments a year. So roughly one a month.
So how do we fall into that 1%? I mean, what startups should do to fall in that 1%?
Since you're asking me a wish list question, Alok, like Jkisan example, I can tell you it's a.
No, why I'm asking this is because at the end of the day, the startup should know how to reach your fund and what you're looking, because every VC would have different mindset and different mantra to fund, and that's the reason I thought that. And it's very difficult. You rightly said that at this point of time, only insider startups and startups wherein you have VCs already sitting in, or they have contact, they are able to raise capital. So I'm just trying to help some of the startup to see whether how they can connect to a VC or investor who is really looking to invest and who is very much approachable. So I think from that perspective, I'm asking.
Got it.
Yeah, so you were saying about your latest investment, what you saw.
I would also add that now we have the benefit of hindsight. So, we're looking at the post-COVID world, and really some things don't fit, or we are unlikely to see clarity in those business models over the next, 6 to 12 months, anybody's guess. And some, on the contrary, are where you can absolutely see why it makes more sense now. Right? You get the tailwind. So those ones are the ones we are prioritizing. So explaining to us why COVID is, good for you. Why are you likely to grow during this time? Is very helpful for us to, to quickly zone in and say yes or no to that, because something good has to be happening given the environment, because otherwise it's a tough environment, right? So in generally we should be doing fewer investments. Where we are going really is, like I was telling you, Jkisan example, it's a perfect combination of an A grade team and a A grade market. So those you normally have a B grade team, A market, and vice versa. But those are obviously our wish list. That's the right combination. Where we are convinced that this is a market, like I said, 3 billion OPD visits. We think it's a great market. Others, if you're able to build APIs for the entire banking sector in India, fintech sector in India, great market. So we should be clearly able to see why you are in a market, which is big in size. Why COVID is good? Why is there a tailwind because of COVID? Why is adoption happening faster? And again, why are you as a team stronger to execute what have you done in the past, and currently show more evidence of execution rather than spending too much time on explaining the business. I think how you've reacted to COVID, what you've done to overcome, how you've performed in the last 12 months or since you started, that would be very good evidence for us to look at look at the team strength.
Thanks, Rahul, for that insight. Pearl, since you have just launched your fund and it's very focused at the early stage startups, so are you looking to fund few of the startups at this point of time in the COVID? And what are you looking, not from a sector perspective or from a theme perspective, but from founder team or what are you looking to invest at this point of time?
Yeah, sure. So we have started looking at quite a few deals. Out of the fund, we haven't made our first investment, but we are pretty close to sort of doing that at this point. Definitely what we look for is the founder should have at least worked on an MVP. That is the first gating item for us. We are not investing in ideation stage at this point. But after that, of course, as Rahul mentioned, market is really important for us. Like, how big is the TAM? Is this achievable? If you're creating a market, or if you're creating demand, so if you have a solid path towards how you're going to be able to do that. And then the second is the background of the founder. Have they previously demonstrated any execution capability? How long have they been in the sector or in the business? Why they think that they are a better fit for this particular product than somebody else. And the third thing that we also focus on is whether it's a white space or not. Because what happens in early stage is that we'll see something, a new company that has a little differentiation compared to what is already existing. So we'd like to see something that has more of a differentiation, at least 10 times better product before we can go ahead with it. So these are three things, that'll sort of help us at least take it to the next level and have a conversation with them. After that, it sort of also depends on how comfortable we get with the team. How do we think the rapport between the two of us is, between our team and the founders, so to take it forward from that point.
That's great. So I think with this, I'm done with the questions which I have, and I request if any of you from the audience, if they have any questions, you can write to us, or Rahul, Pearl, if you can also mention your email ID to our audience, or you can just type it in the chat box. I can send those to all the audiences. And I think that's it from my side at this point of time. And thanks, Rahul and Pearl, for joining in and sharing your insight, and also uh, what are you looking to invest at this point of time, and also thanks for supporting the Indian startup ecosystem. Uh, don't forget that we are launching. So this is to everyone. We are launching our first cohort 1.0, and which is on 8th of October 2020. More details will come in days to come. And we all are looking to support Indian startup ecosystem at this point of time, and see how we can help India grow from an entrepreneurial point of view. I again thank everyone for joining in, also on Facebook and on Twitter. Thanks for joining in. Thanks, Rahul. Thanks, Pearl, again. And bye till the time we do another webinar another day. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Alok.
Bye, Pearl.
Thanks. Thanks. Bye.